long runway to learn about the program, to build their understanding about it, and hopefully to apply. And when they do apply, get access to all of the supports available, which includes not just the fee reductions in the GTLD evaluation fee, but also access to volunteer professional service providers, as well as a capacity development program that ICANN is constructing right now. And so what's interesting, just in the first months, and I can't provide detailed numbers just yet because I don't want to take the wind out of our sails on Wednesday when we announce the numbers, but just in the first month, we are already seeing interest in the applicant support program from all corners of the world and all regions, including Africa, which is really fantastic because it's only been open for just a few weeks. But we're also under sort of no illusion that ICANN and the ICANN community can do this alone, right? So while we're putting a lot of resources and effort into spreading awareness and understanding about the next round and the opportunities therein, especially to advance digital inclusion, we're also relying on the ICANN community and the broader internet governance community to spread the word, to raise awareness, to help people understand the relevance of the domain name system and GTLDs to the work that they're already doing. And that's where this broader community, including the IGF, comes in. I will note that similar to the 2012 round, but again, only .kids was able to take advantage of it, the fee reduction provided to supported GTLD applicants is really intended to be meaningful and significant. And so this will be a 75 to 85% discount on the GTLD evaluation fee. That's sort of the base fee of evaluating the application, but also on some conditional evaluations. So for example, if you are a supported applicant that applies for a geographic name, that's a conditional evaluation that would also be receiving the same discount of 75 to 85%. If you're a community priority evaluation applicant, you're applying for a top-level domain that represents a community, that's another evaluation fee that again would be receiving that 75 to 85% discount. So the idea is to provide financial support not just on a sort of one-time discount, but also to think about the whole life cycle and journey of the applicant, and how do we support and sustain more diverse entrants into this space over that course of that life cycle. And so ICANN did research to understand, what other sort of similar programs like the applicant support program tend to provide. And it's usually this beyond the sort of one-time upfront investment, you're providing that long-term capacity development, training, and support. For supported applicants that become registry operators, like .kids, there would also be a discount in the annual base registry agreement fees. And so that's something that we're, again, trying to help the first few years of a supported applicant becoming that registry operator to kind of help them get up to speed in the market and run their business. We're providing that discount in the longer term for the first 3 years post-operation. I know that there's been some discussion about the fee for the registry service providers, and I've heard some folks in the community talk about the fact that that was not considered in terms of like how do we provide support for registry service providers. So it just wasn't a policy recommendation, but it's something that has gained a lot of interest and discussion since the registry service provider program has launched. And I think it's interesting to consider that in terms of the future continuous improvement of future next rounds. How can we further improve the opportunities for diverse participation in all aspects of the next round, not just in the GTLD side, but also the RSP side. Adam, did I address your question? Is there anything else you wanted me to speak to?
I think that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Christy. And I just wanted to say, I think what's clear from this is that there's many thousands of hours of work have gone into looking at reviewing the 2012 process and making improvements for this latest round. And while it sounds, when we say the word ICANN has done, it's important to remember that this is a community of volunteers. The staff guide the process, but these ideas and these improvements, these mechanisms come from our multi-stakeholder community, of course. I was wondering, we I mentioned perhaps board member might want to respond on an ASP-related issue, or one of the comments from Lucky. But really, Sajid, if that's something you want to pick up on, or if it's we'd like to continue on to Jen and the opportunities and challenges. But you could
Sure.
comment?
I mean, I was previously talking about the 3 fault lines, right? So the fault lines that is essentially causing digital divide. And if you look at the first fault line that I talked about, which is how to make people access to internet, I think it's very important to create the ability for different people to participate in the system. At the end of the day, if we believe in the hypothesis that competition creates innovation, then the more open we make it for people to join through different support programs, the better competition we'll have, the better innovation we'll have, and the whole ecosystem will flourish, right? So on the application support program, we have done a lot of work. Martin, I know you wanted to say something, or Becky. Yeah. Sure.
Thanks. Christy's talked a lot about the applicant support program, but it is based on longstanding policy and policy that the community implemented to support diversity and inclusiveness on the internet. And the support, as Christy noted, will be meaningful in terms of both the application fee reduction, also enabling applicants, supported applicants to participate in auctions in a meaningful way. And unlike the 2012 round, this year in this round, we will be contemplating support, ongoing support, to enable the domain to get up and running. So deferred, discounted ICANN fees and the like, all are things that are going to be very important. Ultimately, there needs to be a market that supports a domain, so it's not intended to be forever, but the goal would be to provide enough support to ensure that the domain is able to operate and able to educate people about its existence and create a market and create interest in it. So it's a very important aspect of increasing access to the internet locally across the world.
Thank you, Becky.
Hi.
Thanks, Sajid. Not sure.
Adam,
Yes.
if I may come in,
Please, Lucky.
and thanks for those comments that have been made, regarding the solutions and how this applicant support program is being implemented and rolled out to include people from the underdeveloped world or countries. But one of the things that I want us to think of and consider, think of it very strongly, whilst we're talking of bringing in other mechanisms, training and other support mechanisms, what if we make this leap of faith and say, based on the evidence that we have, there is empirical evidence that currently the 4 GTLDs in Africa, .Africa, .Cape Town, Durban, and Joburg, have not been very successful, but they've been successful in the sense that they are still active 10 years later, and they are growing very slowly. Africa has just made the turn, the corner, there is growth. What if we use that very lessons that we have in our hands that we have seen and allow those very entities to be the ones working with the local communities to give training to the local communities, those potential applicants on the continent, to be trained or given support by the guys who are on the ground, the guys that have seen it, the guys that have walked the journey. And I'm referring here to Registry Africa. Registry Africa has been very active in growing these domain names, these geographics, and I believe we've been successful. I believe that the model, there is a business model that we have shared at the last Africa Strategy session in Istanbul, where we believe that if we were to create a model whereby there's a sponsor or an applicant, and that applicant would be a city or a municipality, a county, or even a community. And these will be the entities that apply for a domain name. And that domain name, they will then appoint an operator consisting of a registry and a registry backend provider. And this could be a local provider. And this could be done as a build, operate, and transfer basis. And they would be building this on behalf of this city or municipality. The interest for the city and the municipality is to provide service to its residents and derive revenue from the utilities or the services that they are providing to their citizens. And out of that, they grant each citizen, each utility holder, a domain name, an email address. And that email address would enhance the delivery of bills and the settlement of bills based on what would be utilized. We believe such a model, when applied or implemented on the continent and underserved or underdeveloped countries, it would attract more players, more participants. And this needs some kind of understanding that we have seen it, we have walked this ground, we think we understand what is the best mechanism of bringing about inclusion. And this is my submission to this audience, that consider this business model of an applicant being a city municipality, gaining or getting access to that discount, appointing a registry operator and a back-end provider to be the ones who are doing the work, and building websites alongside that, providing, and we are looking now at where is the next wave of a domain name. For us, the next wave for domain names, when we talk of inclusivity and innovation, is getting more of our own participating in e-commerce. E-commerce is the next great space for domain names. If we can participate extensively, solid in that space, would have been able to achieve a lot in this space. Thanks, Adam. There.
So I just want to say to something that Lucky mentioned that's very important. Part of the program for applicant support will be sort of pro bono assistance in terms of we're looking for people to help applicants with writing applications, understanding the legal issues, but also the business models. And so what Lucky was saying about learning the lessons from what Africa, Cape Town have done and how they've grown, and the insights that you're providing, Lucky, are critically important. And I hope we will have a lot of people who will volunteer to be part of the applicant support to get that kind of hands-on, on the ground experience with it. But I know that's something that the applicant support program is putting together as the outreach for the pro bono, for the sort of non-monetary but very critical support in terms of business models and dealing with the paperwork and the like. And then you want to... Okay, so there's also a question from Neil in the chat about the prospect of an applicant for the registry service provider pre-evaluation form. The cost for the evaluation of back-end service providers is, like the cost of the GTLD program in general, cost recovery. So there is a $92,000 projection, but that is based on a certain number of applicants, and the fee itself will go down if we get more applicants for that. The other thing that's really important to keep in mind is in the last round, every evaluation, every application included an evaluation of the back-end service provider. And so there was a cost to the applicant in the form of that evaluation. That won't be here this time because the registry service providers are being evaluated on a sort of once and done process. So there are savings that will, and benefits that will accrue to supported applicants and applicants in underserved regions from the program itself. And then finally, the question of sort of whether there should be applicant support for back-end registries raises really important stability and security issues. Back-end service providers are businesses that are going to be, operating multiple top-level domains all around the world, and the very last thing that we should allow to happen is to not thoroughly evaluate the ability of that service provider to provide high quality service. And that costs money, that evaluation costs money. So although I think we understand and agree with the desire to have globally located back-end service providers, we have to balance that with the absolutely critical stability and security requirements, and take into account the fact that this once and done evaluation process will benefit applicants globally who will not have to bear the costs of those as part of the evaluation process.
Thanks, Becky, and thanks for the... Oh, go ahead, Martin, please.
Hi, this is Maarten Botteman. Sorry for just to add to what Becky said, another big difference between the first round was that there were just a handful back-end providers. Actually, there's now a market with choice, including non-profit organizations and CCs, so you have much more offer and much more reasonable pricing as well. Just wanted to add that part.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Becky, for your comments. It's very helpful, very kind of you. Just wanted to welcome Ram Mohan to the room. I know you've been in much demand in other sessions. So Ram, as I mentioned, is the Chief Strategy Officer for Identity Digital and one of the largest operators of the new TLD batch from 2012. And wanted to say we've been talking about, Lucky and Jen have been talking about their experience from 2012 and Jen from before with .Asia and how that's worked, and Lucky's made some very important points about inclusion and how we can get people applying from the African content, etc. But please make an introduction and give us some ideas. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you so much. And my apologies for joining this session late. I was speaking at another one. So I want to focus my comments on in two areas. One is that we look at innovation with a lowercase I rather than innovation with an uppercase I. Let me explain what that means. Often the success of programs is only seen years out, and in the meanwhile you have many prognosticators who pre-decide and who say that a program has failed or has succeeded based on conventional metrics. Metrics, for example, in the domain name industry, such as how many domains have been registered, And you find especially a prevalent logic inside of the domain name industry that focuses on success almost directly correlated to the number of domains that people have registered. But I'd like to say that that is actually a myth. If you look at my own company and the 300 plus domain names that we have, I can tell you that we have success in all of them, not in the way of looking at it purely from a commercial, is it a profit-making enterprise, one TLD at a time? So one way of looking at innovation is, for us, has been in the existing domain name space prior to the various rounds that ICANN has introduced, as the gold standard has been .com and in the GTLD space, and businesses, organizations applying for a .com, getting a .com domain name. We are now in a situation where it's somewhere in the order of 17 or 18 characters that you have to string together to get an open name that is just easily available in .com, without paying any kind of a premium, right? So if, just to give you an example, if I say I want to get, Ram's Studio, if I type in ramstudio.com, it's hard to get. It's probably gone. Even if I type in Ram's-Studio, even that is hard to get. And what you'll find is engines that come back and say, how about ramstudioonline.com? How about ramsdigitalstudio.com, etc., right? The lowercase I innovation that has happened is with the advent of new TLDs and the availability of them, is that I can go and get ram.studio, or I can get ram.photography, or whatever it is, right? And there is innovation that has come about just by that, because you're bringing communities that were otherwise forced to get very long strings that are often not easy to remember, often not easy to relay. Those strings are now no longer as important because you can get memorable, descriptive strings available directly in the domain space. And I think that is true innovation that is being fostered. So that's the one thing that I'd like to make a point on. The second is on, we've talked here about diversity and inclusion. The thing here is that if you do not get to linguistic diversity combined with the other kinds of diversity that ICANN is looking for, you're going to fail. There has to be linguistic diversity as a core outreach goal, as a core model for a definition of success. It's not the only determinant of success, but it ought to be a significant factor and a significant metric that you measure, because the world that we know is not a world of English and Spanish and Chinese and Arabic, right? The world that we know is far more multilingual, but we do not have systems at the domain name space, at the domain name level, that can reflect the actual reality of the people of the world. And for that, we need to really have a focus on linguistic diversity. So I'm pleased that there is a session tomorrow on universal acceptance and internationalized domain names. It's not enough to just say, let us get names in your language, let us get names accessible online. We have to also look at are the various languages and the communities that have those languages, do they have the knowledge, understanding, awareness to be able to participate in what you're bringing forward? Because when they do that, you will find lowercase innovation coming through.
Nice new way to look at this. And Jen.Asia and language and the issues around that. How do you respond to this idea of lowercase innovation based on language and inclusion? Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. I thought we weren't supposed to talk about it, but I'm happy as ever to be able to say more. I think especially coming from Asia Pacific, language is ultimately so important. Almost none of us in Asia Pacific has English as our first language. It's some of us it's our second language, third language, or even fourth language. It's really important for the community that we're trying to serve to actually serve their needs, for them to be able to not only know they can navigate the internet in their own language, that they have the know-how to do so. And I'm really happy to hear both from Becky and also Christy at the improvements that have been made towards the applicant support program, because obviously .kids was the beneficiary, the single beneficiary of the 2012 round applicant support program. But I mean, we're happy in that way, but looking at it overall, that is a sign that there's a lot more things that need to be improved coming to the new round. Where can we really target and provide this benefit? International domain names is one of the priorities that ICANN has said time and time again that they are looking for the new round. Even this morning, we heard from Curtis that, you know, this is what ICANN really wants to happen, to be able to serve the underserved or underrepresented regions, to be able to get these people online, being able to use these new domain names in a way not only to benefit the community, but in a way that allows for innovation, allows for market-driven innovation and entrepreneurship. The lowercase a that, not a, lowercase I, see, English is not my first language either, that Ram was saying is so critical. It's so critical. And I think especially for Asia Pacific, because linguistic diversity is so broad, it is more than just that. We're talking now about digital inclusion and language justice. And I think that's something that Ram touched on is really near and dear to .Asia's heart, of course .kids as well. What we're trying to look, our wishes, if we had 3 wishes for what .Asia wants to see for the next round is, of course, more applicants coming in from Asia Pacific region. We are a huge region with most of the world population and growing. And more from community applicants, because I heard both from Becky and Christy that the improvements done for these different evaluation processes, including fee reductions, that is very important. But in addition to that, to provide the knowledge and the upskilling that allows them to succeed and sustain their business. That's the most important part. So more from community, that the community priority evaluation should lean towards supporting those who want to be community and not just kind of looking at it from the lens of, oh, we must weed out these people or these organizations that are trying to game the system. Of course, every single system will have people who are looking for the loopholes, but the outset of how we're trying to organize and design these programs really should be for people who want to use this for the benefit of that community. So hopefully that answers a little bit more. And the final little bit on internationalized domain names, my last wish, perhaps, that it's now on the equal footing to all the different ASCII domain names, the English language domain names that you see. So that could be not something that's weird or new, but that becomes something that's really common and nobody blinks an eye at it.
We switched it off. I put a link into the chat about the workshop tomorrow, and and the words beginning for that session are that the internet must be multilingual and inclusive is the first sentence of the description there. So we have about 24 minutes left, 20 minutes left, something like that, 20 minutes left. Are there any questions from the audience? You're here, been very attentive and patient at the beginning. So would anybody like to raise a hand and we'll pass a mic around, or the same for any question online? If not, I would like to go back to, could you pass the microphone backwards, please? Would like to go back to Lucky and his comment about solutions. I don't think we should miss that. Sir.
Thank you very much, Paulos Nyirenda from Malawi. I just wanted maybe to raise the issue, one of the issues that lacked, which is success of the new GTLDs that were put up in the last round, especially those from Africa, Johannesburg, Cape Town. They haven't been as successful as expected, and I think that this applies to quite a few other new GTLDs. I don't know if in the next round there is an evaluation on this and how ICANN wants to move forward with the success of new GTLDs.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. So I want to say we should expect not all GTLDs will succeed. We should walk away from this idea that just because ICANN introduces a new GTLD program and you have hundreds, if not thousands, of new GTLDs that come through, that they all must be successful. I think at least from ICANN's point of view, the goal has to be to create a level playing field and to make sure that the ingredients for success are present and accessible to all. Those ingredients include the applicant support, they include the technical knowledge, they include linguistic ability, they include universal acceptance, things like that. The rest of it, where there are market forces that come to bear, I really think we should allow economics and market forces to do what they do well, rather than try to engineer some kind of social experiment to arrive at some definition of success.
If I can add a few points, the whole multi-stakeholderism that ICANN is very proud of is essentially means that all the different voices gets heard and gets built into the different activities and policies that we form. So as a result of that, this multilingualism, which is an issue, and that's what you see different activities like UA Days and international domain names and many initiatives, including application support program that has been taken. But I completely agree with Ram that at the end of the day, it needs to make sense for someone to continue a domain name indefinitely. I mean, application support program can only continue up to a certain extent. It cannot be infinite.
Yeah, if I may come in, I think I'm quite excited by Ram's approach to complex issues. He explains them with lower and upper cases, and of course it makes sense the more he puts context into that. And starting with the second point where he talks to diversity and inclusion, and in particular the linguistic diversity. For us, one of the things that we picked up in early days is that this is very critical, the issue of linguistic diversity. And this was supported by the fact that there is less than 15% of African content, I'm talking our history books, our music, etc., that is available on internet. And it makes it difficult for the African child to go into internet and find sufficient information of themselves, something that had been created and generated by themselves across the multiple languages on the continent. And that, again, for us becomes an inhibitor to this digital inclusion. And we need to start bridging that gap to this digital inclusion by ensuring that more African languages are translated into, or more internet content is translated into African languages, so that this can be accessible to the larger community. And with that, we will see more people participating, and we'll see more appreciation for what we are discussing today, the DNS, the domain name, and the inclusiveness. And then those lower cases and innovation, it is well and good, again, there are certain things that are price sensitive. Whilst we say the success of a domain name is not the number of names that you would have sold, it proves slightly different, when you don't have the numbers to begin to innovate around. We have been able to innovate as an entity around names like your co.za. We've been able to build other solutions because we have scale. We don't need to reach the scale that would be taking away from our creativeness, or what we would call the uppercase innovation. It tells us that numbers do matter, especially for certain markets. You need to be price sensitive on the African continent. You cannot charge any fee that is very far from the market conditions. That will make it even more difficult for people to participate. So we need to be grappling. For us, we're grappling with all those things. How sensitive can we be to the pricing? Make sure that it's correct. And once the numbers are there and the scale is there, then we begin to bring in innovation. We bring more solutions into this thing, so that this domain name is not just what it is, blank and boring, but we put color, we put flair into these things. This reminds me of a different solution that was innovated on the continent. I don't know, most of you might not or could have heard of it. Banks, for a very long time, have been excluding a lot of the citizens across the continent. And one mobile operator realized that we have a lot of people who are not banked, and we can use our platform, our mobile platform, to make sure that people have access to cash, access to money, or they can use this tool, this mobile phone, to make payments and transact, buy tomatoes, pay for the piki or that taxi in town. And that brought in M-Pesa. And that was the innovation when people felt marginalized by banking systems, that they couldn't qualify, they couldn't fulfill some of these KYCs. And then another instrument was developed, which was more accommodating. And I'm seeing that for us, again, if we want to have this inclusiveness properly addressed, we have to think with an uppercase innovation and come up with solutions that are going to bring more participants in the third world, or those underdeveloped or underserved markets. We have to think outside what we are starting. We are on the right track, but let's think again. Is this all that we can do? Is this sufficient? Does this provide a foolproof solution for what we want to achieve, inclusiveness? History will judge us that we have not done enough. We have failed to think far and fast to ensure that we include those that are marginalized. Thank you.
We have over to Jen again, and then I have Nick Wedman-Smith behind me asking questions. Oh, go to Nick, please.
Oh, thank you, Adam. I think that works, I hope. Very strange with headphones, not headphones. So my name's Nick Wedman-Smith. I'm employed by a company called Nominet. And from our perspective, from the last round of the new GTLDs, I wanted to just share a little bit of a story, because although the United Kingdom is, one of the G7 wealthy nations, we have areas of significant deprivation and social challenges, and I think that's the case in even in the very wealthiest of countries. So we were very interested to get better digital presence for the Welsh community, which is a population of about 5 million and includes some of the very poorest parts of the United Kingdom. And I have to tell you that when we approached the Welsh elected officials in terms of the cost of the new GTLD applications, plus, of course, the technical time and infrastructure and expertise required. And to make it twice as bad, they wanted two, because they wanted the one in the Welsh version, because part of this is about linguistic diversity, so they needed to have two application fees, plus two letters of credit for the continuing obligations thing, which is also extremely expensive. Now, I want to be positive to say that actually it's been a very good initiative, and over the course of time, they've now got a lot of very high-profile registrations. For example, the national sport is rugby, and so they use a .wales and a .cymru domain names for their national sport, for the local government, for the musical and cultural things are all very well represented online. And they have now, I think, between the two, 20,000 domains under registration, which is sustainable. But I wanted to say that it has been first of all, it required an investor which was prepared to take a lot of risk and over the long time, and that investor was Nominate, in fact. So we paid the application fees and we did all of the things that they needed to do. And then it has taken the order of 12 years of continuous investment and over a long, long period of time before you see any sort of return. So I suppose what I'm just saying, while the applicant support program is being still refined within ICANN, you just need to understand that even for sophisticated applicants with relatively deep pockets, it was quite a hard piece of work and it required a lot longer. Certainly the business models that we put together, which our finance team signed off on when we paid for the applications, were well far off the mark, is what I would say. And I think just urge everybody to sort of try to whatever you can do to help people with the applications. It'll need 10 times that what you're currently, in order to get these things off the ground, because it's a hugely complex process and a hugely expensive and technically time-consuming one, even for people who are expert in the area. That's my thoughts on that. I don't know, it's not really a question, I'm just saying you need to do more.
Over to Jen, who's been doing a lot already. Do more, Jen. Thank you.
Where to even begin? Okay. Actually, I was really happy to go after Nick because I was going to bring back the example of .kids, which was the sole recipient of the applicant support program back in 2012. I mean, we didn't launch until about 2 years ago. It's taken a very, very long time. And .Asia is actually the organization behind all of this. We are supposedly on a cost recovery basis, but really we have underwritten everything, the know-how on how to create the registry policies, leveraging on our registry backend providers, of course, to do all of that. And I foresee coming into the new round, I mean, talking again about success, right? Looking at, if we're looking at pure numbers, that's just one measurement of success. I think success means different things to different people. I like how Lucky has mentioned time and time again as well, and it's really important to stress. The African continent really needs to look at this, whether or not this new GTLD program for them coming in the new round, what success will look like for the African region. And I could bring it back to Asia Pacific. What does success might look like for Asia Pacific? Is it more applications with internationalized domain names? Is it more, brands coming in? Is it more SMEs? Is it more innovative, applications? I think the answer is all of the above. And I think right now, as a community as well, we're trying to refine the ways to be able to get to the success. Not only, of course, ICANN, the organization, but ICANN is also a community who's trying to look at lessons learned from the previous round to be able to apply them and create solutions that allow for innovation, but not to the point where this new, as a new applicant, you want to be able to eventually independently run your domain, not always have this, guardrails around or training wheels, as I like to call them, forever, because that is not really a true sense of success. So being able to give that that boost and that help to the underserved regions, to the markets that really need this, but don't know how. I think that is the balance we really have to strike here.
Ram, please.
Briefly, success for ICANN in this next round perhaps should include some estimation of the number of TLDs that will not succeed. Because that is the market reality. And we really, I think, are doing all of us a disservice by going into this with an idea that 100% success rate or else. And I think that's unrealistic. That's not how the marketplace works. We ought to have a recognition of that. We also ought to recognize that in some cases, the need may be apparent, but the demand may not be evident, right? Just because there is a need for something doesn't mean that the people who profess to have the need will be willing to go and stand up and, you know, open up their wallets and buy that name, right? So I think some level of realism and some level of, you know, projecting and being quite clear that while the new TLD program will and should work on diversity, applicant support, especially linguistic diversity, which is close to my heart as well, while all of those things are there, if you do all of those things, you should still expect some level of failure.
Final comment, and then we'll probably have to wrap up, I think.
Thank you. I mean, wearing my investor hat, we always accept some failures. And I've seen companies launching products which do very well till they start charging for it. So you know, there is always this reality, and you know, there are realities that we need to accept, but we continue to support. I mean, like I said, you know, ICANN listens to the voices. The whole idea of multi-stakeholderism is to listen to voices around and, you know, do whatever we can to support.
Very much, everybody, for your time this afternoon. We mentioned there is a workshop tomorrow afternoon around the issues of multilingualism, IDNs, universal acceptance, so please look at the schedule for a workshop number 150. Want to thank particularly online Lucky and Christy. Lucky for the challenges you're facing across the region, and also solutions and issues that are very relevant to the whole of WSIS and not just discussions with an ICANN community, so very relevant. To Jen for just being very kind and helpful throughout and providing a lot of useful information, particularly at the beginning while I was running around there. Thank you. Incredibly kind. And Sajid for, you know, the fault line scenarios and ideas. Ram, I like, you know, lowercase innovation and the importance of language. So I think it's been very helpful, and very grateful to all of you for being here and to our speakers. So thank you. The end. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Alô, 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 alô. Oh, oh, oh. Hello. Alô. Au, oh, ai, ei, ei, ei. Okay. Okay. Hello, test. Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hello. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Hello. 1, 2, 3. Yes. Welcome everyone to the workshop States and the Digital Sovereignty Infrastructural Challenges. I am Rodolfo Avelino, counselor of the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee, and I will be moderating these sessions. We also have here Juliana Ons as online mediator, and Ramon Costa as rapporteur. Both are technical advisors for CGI.br. First, I would like to thank the IGF organization and everyone that is present today. A special thanks to our speakers that will contribute to our debate. The development of the internet are marketed by the consolidations of large digital platforms, datafications, and the growing use artificial intelligence. This caused significant changes not only in social process, but also in sessions public services such as health, educations, communications, and the state's capacities in general. Despite technologies, advances, problems of the opacity, national security, surveillance, and autonomy to implement digital policies arise. These issues can be framed under the conceptions of the digital sovereignty, a notion that can have multiple meanings and purposes, raising themes such as the security of digital infrastructures, the security of the strategies data, innovation, and the state's capacity to guarantee fundamental rights. These sessions aims at discussions, policies, initiatives to implement digital infrastructures in different regions and countries in light of different approaches to digital sovereignty. I hope we have a great conversations and that which experience may serve as inspirations for others. Now, I would like to give the floor to our speakers. Our first presentations will be delivered by Dr. Min Yang, a professor of the journalism studies at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and also a CyberBricks Fellow. She will start our conversations by presenting the different conceptions of the digital sovereignty. Dr. Yang, you have the floor for 80 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues at CGI Brazil, for convening the session and for inviting me to join. Can you hear me all right? Just double checking. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And greetings also to participants from around the world. My contribution to the panel is based largely on a book I co-edited with Dr. Luca Belli of FGV Law School. And can I have the slides up, please? Thank you. Can you move to the next slide, please? Hello, can move to the next slide, please? Yes. Thank you so much. So the book is titled Digital Sovereignty in the BRICS Countries, How the Global South and Emerging Power Alliances Are Reshaping Digital Governance, coming out in 2 weeks through Cambridge University Press. I will develop my remarks today in 2 parts. First, I will trace the development of digital sovereignty and explain why digital sovereignty is gaining currency. Second, I will offer a broad framework for conceptualizing digital sovereignty beyond a traditional normative definition of sovereignty centered around nation states. In fact, I would argue digital sovereignty is not something that belongs to the states owning. Instead, digital sovereignty, as broadly conceptualized, complements the multi-stakeholder model by foregrounding the underlying power issues that have prevented multi-stakeholderism to be more widely adopted. So to start, next slide, please. Given the IGF, one slide back. To start, given the IGF is a global forum under the auspice of the UN, it's appropriate to recognize that the UN is a post-World War II creation based on national independence and sovereignty. The idea of sovereignty, which can be traced back to the French philosopher Jean Bodin in the 16th century, as well as the 1648 Peace of Westphalia, is foundational to the modern system of nation states. As such, states are thought to enjoy territorial integrity, legal equality, and non-interference in international affairs. However, all of us also recognize that such normative and very idealistic notions of sovereignty are often good on paper, but not so good in practice. Sovereignty is frequently a function of power. Strong states, for example, can invade other states, think Iraq War and the current war in Ukraine. Weaker states often lack power to exert influence. Next slide, please. The problem of power imbalance is especially evident in the digital era, where much of the world's digital infrastructure, data, services, and increasingly AI depends on a handful of Silicon Valley firms. Snowden's revelation of NSA's global surveillance program in 2013 made it clear that the US government cannot be trusted. Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal and the general failure of US big tech in the 2016 US presidential election also made it clear that US big tech cannot be trusted. While internet sovereignty was once thought to be an authoritarian product shipped out of China, post-Snowden, it's not surprising why more and more countries, including EU, as a coalition of nations, are picking up the banner of digital sovereignty. And in fact, EU means by digital sovereignty self-determination to voice their dissatisfaction. It's also not surprising why ICANN was pressured to move out of the US Commerce Department in 2014. Whether the effort came from individual states, group of states, or multi-stakeholder fora, they share one thing in common. As the global consensus of US-centered global digital order is breaking down, national and international actors are in search of alternative to build a new digital order. Next slide, please. The moment we're in is not unlike the New World Information and Communication Order New WICO debate in the 1970s. Next slide, please. Hello? Next slide, please.
1 minute, please.
Thank you. The New WICO debate in the 1970s culminated in the McBride Report published by UNESCO in 1980. At the time, information sovereignty and cultural sovereignty, these were the exact phrases from the report, were of concern to global South countries, which were critical of the free flow of information agenda championed by the US and UK, seen as an instrument for information colonization and cultural imperialism. In the end, the US and UK pulled out of the New WICO debate, arguing global South countries used information sovereignty and cultural sovereignty as a pretext for censorship and control at home. Next slide, please. The power asymmetry then mirrors the power symmetry today. While state-centric perspective remains essential to understand digital sovereignty, many researchers, including myself, also recognize digital sovereignty is a signifier, is a term with many different meanings used by different actors to express their aspirations and also to assert control and power. Thus, in the book volume, we adopted a more generative definition of digital sovereignty as the exercise of agency, power, and control in shaping digital infrastructure, data, services, and protocols. The book project's bottom-up efforts also led us to develop a broader framework of digital sovereignty, mapping the following 7 perspectives. Next slide, please. In the state digital sovereignty perspective, nation states exert control over digital architecture, data, protocols, and services. It can be both positive and negative. While Brazil, for example, built the PIX digital payment system during the pandemic, and India built the UPI digital payment system as digital financial infrastructure to increase independence and inclusion, Russia, on the other hand, built the RUNET for digital isolation. In the supranational digital sovereignty perspective, regional alliances like the EU develop unified digital policies as well as legal and digital infrastructure. Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel, in fact, gave a speech at the 2019 IGF defining EU's digital sovereignty as a form of self-determination. So for EU countries, being sovereign doesn't mean working alone, but working together. Network digital sovereignty is something ICANN as an organization might endorse and emphasizes decentralized control, network interoperability, freedom from nation states, and global coalition. Corporate digital sovereignty, on the other hand, tends to endorse the freedom of tech giants in driving digital economies and shaping digital norms, something scholars have critiqued to be a form of surveillance capitalism or data colonialism. Personal digital sovereignty, on the other hand, emphasizes empowerment of individuals to control their digital identities and personhood. Post-colonial digital sovereignty highlights efforts by former colonized nations to reclaim autonomy, access, ownership, and control in the digital space. Finally, Commons digital sovereignty emphasizes community-driven governance of shared digital resources and production of public digital goods. This is embodied in the open source free software movement, as well as international digital solidarity and labor movements. So for us, digital sovereignty is not something that belongs to the nation states owning. Broadly conceptualized, digital sovereignty does not replace the multi-stakeholder model. On the contrary, it complements it by placing it in a wider discursive field and foregrounding the underlying power issues. Global digital sovereignty shouldn't and cannot be determined by national governments alone, but needs a global coalition to address pressing issues of global divide in digital infrastructure, entrenched challenges of digital surveillance and censorship, as well as structural monopoly and digital inequality. Thank you for allowing me to share my perspective. Look forward to further exchanges and discussions.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Yang. Now introduced, Catherine has been a commissioner of the Georgian National Communication Commission since in 2021. The commissioner has 15 years of professional experience in the telecommunications field. Mrs. Catherine, could you comment on how the Georgian government adapts to undergoing digital transformations and how these projects relate to broader European context?
Thank you very much. I'll try to. I think my presentation will be put on now. And first of all, I want to thank hosts of this very interesting, very important, very much relevant topic of workshop. This is Information and Coordination Center of Brazil. Also, I think everybody will join me thanking the host country, Saudi Arabia, Riyadh, for this amazing venue for the IGF. And it's a great pleasure to share a perspective from another part of the world about how the state can see, very small, tiny state in the South Caucasus can see the challenges and can overcome the challenges related to digital sovereignty. And the previous presenter very in a best manner outlined what are the layers of the digital sovereignty and how it has evolved. And I will be speaking about the very specifically telecom layer, the most upstream perspective of the infrastructural challenges related to my country, Georgia, and it is also related to the region itself, the South Caucasus. So my perspective as representative of the telecom regulator and state representative will be specifically, as I said, to the very upstream layer of the infrastructural challenges. I'm trying to now move on. Thank you. So my friend from South Caucasus is helping me as we do usually. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Nini. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, we all know that most part of the data, as we speak about digital, most part of the data traffic goes through the submarine cables. You know that, and how important submarine cable resilience and resilience levels are. We see that this information was kindly provided by one of our important partners, which is World Bank. So I'm allowed to show this information, but it's actually this first slide is available information you can find on telegeography, and it's updated on a daily basis almost. And you see, this is a most upstream layer of the internet, and this is a value chain, and this is a growing market, and this is the very how to say the basis of our connectivity that enables us to exchange data, to protect data, and these many cables are also created to ensure that the data exchange is resilient. So the sovereignty information on the infrastructure level is protected. If we can go to the next slide. It's a bit of a challenge. Thank you. So now let's speak about the very tiny the segment of this big map of worldwide connectivity, which is South Caucasus, where my country, Georgia, is located. And you can see the map, you can see the geography, and you can see that from this like almost 500 infrastructure connectivity routes, only one route is connecting Georgia and South Caucasus with Europe. And this connection is very important. Direct connection, you understand how important it is if we speak about kind of the infrastructure level resilience and sovereignty of data based on that. And there are the aspects of resilience, which is the providing direct international access, not through some other jurisdictions, but through the sea. This is what makes the subsea cables so important nowadays. And development of more interregional networks is obvious. Necessity of development of more interregional networks is absolute necessity for our region. So this is the challenge we are faced now, and fortunately we have partners who are supporting us with making this connectivity and resilience really to work. I will speak later on that. And what else is happening in our region is that there is a project of Trans-Caspian cables under discussion, which will connect us further to the East Asia or Central Asia, which is, we know that digital is interconnected, so we need to be part of global resilient connectivity paths. And with this, not only the infrastructure level resilience and connectivity, direct connectivity corridors come to our mind, but also the layers that were also so what else comes to mind after seeing that there is definite need of expanding the infrastructure level independence of the region? It comes also the layer of services, software, and data protection. With data related resilience layer, we will speak about the digital hub concept, which is also crucial for our region, which is on.
Hello, check.
Some kind of check. Next slide, please. Thank you. So why we need some kind of inter-regional digital hub? If we speak about the concept of protecting our data, we see that concerning the geopolitical situation around South Caucasus, you can see on the map, how important it is to have the connectivity, some kind of inter-regional connectivity hub that will enable us having the transparent data protection frameworks, which is aligned with the EU GDPR's EU-related data protection legislation, and that will allow us to have some kind of protected sovereign data transfers throughout the region. Another important aspect why we need to have data hubs in region is that upcoming technological demands related with AI definitely requires that information should be brought closer to the customer. So this is another challenge, and this is another important important precondition to building the interregional connectivity hubs, which will involve regional countries, but which will create some kind of alternative to overcome choke points like you see in the Red Sea region. And when we see about the challenges, challenges bring usually the opportunities. So my presentation here was brought to show you that we're trying to turn these challenges into the opportunities for our region. And as I've mentioned in the beginning, if we can move to the next slide. Thank you, Nini. So there are some kind of articles about what are the challenges, how the big techs and geopolitics are reshaping the internet plumbing now, and what is going on around the world. It's very much relevant to our region. And as I mentioned, this concept of South Caucasus Digital Hub to make our data more resilient is kind of the answer to the question how we can build more robust digital service, so digital layers starting from the upstream infrastructure up to the software and data protection layers. And you can see this Baltic Highway project, which is supported by European Union, and we also are supported by World Bank and by European Union to build similar regional connectivity corridors that will enable countries in the region to be connected safely with other worlds and to bring the data closer to our subscriber and to ensure that policies and regulations that are adopted amongst the European Union to be kind of transposed to the regional data hubs. This is how we see answering to the challenge, what I've seen. Of course, this is now in projection stage. The projection stage means that we have some concept how this data center regional hub concept should work. And we really hope that it will be continued and it will turn, because the adoption of AI and growing demand on the machine learning or bringing the more like content into the digital space gives us understanding that this project should be elaborated as soon as possible. So this was what I wanted to share with you, and I'm happy to answer later the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And now introduce it. And Christian is a principal at the Center of Digital Excellence in Johannesburg. He develops digital economy strategies to address Africa's developmental challenges. Christian will comment on the capacity limitations in Africa, different dependence on local private and the international players, connecting to the trade-offs of sovereignty. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, colleagues, for having me. and for the opportunity to participate. Can I ask? Okay, great. Thank you very much. There have been a couple of version changes this morning, so there might be a couple of edits that might not have come through, but we can run with it. So I think the point of departure to start is that digital transformation of the public sector is a prerequisite for socioeconomic development in Africa. African states have struggled to deliver services to people and organizations at scale. And subsequently, these technologies allow them to reach people in need at scale when they need. Unfortunately, despite this prerequisite, let's call it, African countries have largely struggled to deliver on the opportunities of digital transformation. The e-government development index is a useful proxy for that. And we see that there are only 4 African countries that have managed to achieve above the global average. And so there are some critical underlying drivers of this underperformance. In particular, one is acknowledging that many African countries have significant fiscal constraints and significant capacity constraints in terms of their expertise. And that subsequently, this has impacted the rollout of the quality of both hard infrastructure, if we think about data centers and the like, as well as soft infrastructure being the services that, the technologies that are used to deliver services through this hard infrastructure. Next slide, please. If we look at data centers as a proxy for the availability of infrastructure across the continent, we see that there is a rapidly growing demand for more physical infrastructure. This estimate on screen, and apologies that there's no access on this graphic, is that African countries will need to more than double their data center hosting capacity by 2030. At present, though, a number of these countries are underdeveloped. There's not a lot of digital activity, and so localization requirements are hard to meet through a local data center because it's economically infeasible to host a center domestically just to meet those local requirements. Next slide, please. Subsequently, one more slide, please. Yeah, subsequently, we've seen that a number of markets across the country, governments have started or have experimented with deploying their own data centers to manage their own data and operate their own technologies and infrastructures. In many cases, though, due to the capacity limitations, these are poorly managed. They're underutilized, and they have become what is termed here economic drains. Maybe one might call it a white elephant or the like. And it leaves a little bit of a quandary for African countries that are trying to achieve localization requirements independently and autonomously. Next slide, please. And so subsequently, what this means is that there is an inherent dependency in Africa on maybe inherent is a bit of a strong term, but there is a mutual benefit between the state and the private sector in delivering this hard infrastructure, where in many cases private sector players such as your hyperscalers are supporting governments in the operation of their own technologies. Next slide, please. And so subsequently, as the value of digital public infrastructure is better understood and is gathering steam across the globe, we likewise see increasing adoption in Africa. As we saw before with the e-government digital, EGDI and the like, that there is, this adoption is slow or slower across the continent. So these principles, Dr. Min was talking about FOSS, open source and the like. These principles are arguably key mechanisms that will allow service delivery at scale by allowing governments to adopt these technologies, lead with their own interests, and operate them independently and autonomously. Next slide, please. If we break away from or start to unpack the debate within the DPI realm around what is public, we see that there is room to explore the role of the private sector in supporting the design, delivery, and operation of services through technology and government. And so we see in Africa that The private sector has a key role to play in many of these, in many countries in service delivery, creating a question around that P in DPI and whether or not P needs to be big P or small p for those that are participants in the debate. So we know that financial services players, telecoms, retailers, vendors, and community are all supporting or bolstering government in its delivery of services. So arguably, if we think about sovereignty, and this is maybe bending the definition a little bit, there's sovereignty in terms of the government's ability to deliver services independently or its requirements to engage the support of the private sector. And we see that in Africa, participation of the private sector may be a requirement, and is not detrimental inherently. And so this might be a necessity given current limitations. Next slide, please. Likewise, when we look towards the emerging DPI ecosystem, we see that there are a wide variety of non-government players that are offering technology and support. A couple of them are on screen there. So these entities will help governments identify what technologies to use. They will help them roll that technology out and optimize it for their local environment. Again, this is contrary to a hardline view of an independent autonomous state by drawing in the participation of these entities in their support. So these role players, arguably, as non-government role players, are critical to catalyzing digital transformation across Africa. Likewise, equivalent to the requirement of private sector players. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christian. Now, Ritu Gaur is a policy advisor at the Digital Impact Alliance. His area of work includes research and advocacy around the digital public infrastructure. In his previous role at the Ministry of the Electronics and IT, GOI, he worked on DPI negotiations at G20, tackling questions of the why, what, how of DPI. Ritu, given your experience in this field, could you share with us your thoughts on the connections between digital sovereignty and DPI?
Hi, thank you so much. A big thank you to the organizers and everyone else for attending. I wish I was there in person, but you see two gentlemen in the room. There's Ibrahim and there's Tala, who are my colleagues from the Digital Impact Alliance. So if I say anything which is controversial, they are my lawyers. So I want to start, and I also have a great job to explain something which I spend a lot of time theorizing and etc., which is digital public infrastructure. To think about digital public infrastructure, think of society in the digital age. Now, what is it that is absolutely required? It is an identity system which is secure, which can be authenticated against something which can truly prove that you are you, and in a unique way. So an identity is an important component of it. A fast payment systems, which allows you to transact both P2P and person to business, person to person, etc. And then data, which allows you to both store and share your data across both public and private services in order to access different services. Now, it's not restricted to this because DPI is still an evolving concept, and there are already new DPIs in climate, in commerce, etc., such as ONDC, etc. But broadly, think about why are we referring to this as infrastructure is because it lays down just the common minimum rails as in the 19th and the 20th century roads rails did, and then it's for others to come and innovate and build on top of it for developing so many other services. Now, you could ask me a question that this is how digitization happens. What makes it new, or why are we saying this Why are we calling this as an approach? A simple answer to that is think of DPI from three common aspects, which is tech, governance, and community. Now, when you think of technology, it is an amalgamation of open source technologies using open standards and open specs to build the tech that's required. So essentially, for your critical national digital infrastructure, you are not going for big vendor contract, but you are actually building something from scrap. You're using a lot of open source tools. You're using open standards. You're not going for proprietary standards. You're not going for big vendors. You're using a lot of open technologies. The governance of DPI. So first is the tech. Second is the governance. The governance of DPI is multi-layered. There is a governance embedded in the protocol itself, which is safety by design, security by design. Then there's a governance of specific aspect of DPI. Let's say if it's an ID, then there'll be an ID regulation or an ID legislation. And of course, your broader umbrella data protection GDPR kind of regulation, which also applies. So there is the tech, then there's the governance, and then the most important part, DPI is nothing without its community. So to borrow a phrase from a professor, David East calls it that DPI allows you to have shared means to many ends, because essentially it's laying out the most common rail, but then allowing others to build a market economy around it, allowing others to use that ID to do a KYC, to then provide services, allowing others to build that payment service app to then offer other things. So that's the amalgamation of these three things. And as Kristen referred, the two most important things of digital public infrastructure is it has to be open for all to access, and it needs to be interoperable. It needs to be interoperable across different systems in the country, etc. Now, the element of sovereignty as to what is the role of DPI and sovereignty is linked. I believe DPI does empower governments and countries to exercise more sovereign control over their critical national digital assets. And we've seen this in the case of India. India gradually moved away from Visa, MasterCard. Now 80% of our financial transaction goes through our national payment infrastructure called UPI. 80% of our digital financial transactions are not going through Visa, MasterCard, but are this thing. Our national ID data, which includes our biometric, etc., everything is coded, homegrown, and it sits out of the data, sits out of India. So I think in a lot of sense, both India, Brazil, Singapore, Togo, we've seen that how DPI has been a critical enabler of sovereignty. But now I think a large, so I think at this stage that we need to take a step back and actually analyze what is sovereignty, what is digital sovereignty, and what does it mean in this context. I'm going to break it down into three aspects. One being the data part of it, the other being the hardware part of it, and third being the software part of it. The software is the most easiest part. Why? How does DPI enable sovereignties? A lot of DPIs are built on open source softwares. So essentially, you're just taking something from GitHub, contextualizing it, making it in a way that it's feasible for your population, it's contextualized for your population. So essentially, it becomes your own source code with the modulation that is required. We've seen this in the case of MOSIP, which is an ID provider, OpenG2P, which is a government to citizen, government to person payment service provider, Inji, which is a wallet, Mojaloop, again, a fast payment system, OpenCRVS for civil registry, etc. So a lot of these software, which are out there and open as open digital assets, are adapted by the country to then contextualize in their own economy, and then the software is housed and hosted within the premise of that country, and it's owned by that country. So software is one aspect of DPI sovereignty. The second is the hardware. Now, a lot of DPI related stuff requires you to have biometric scanners, cameras, card printers, etc. I think in this case, the sovereignty is a bit malleable because you still require domestic and international vendors to procure. There are still very few companies that still make these kind of standardized hardwares, etc., which are required to enroll large swathes of population. So I think then, and of course, a lot of engineer solutions that are required based on your contextualized population. In India's case, we have something called VoiceBox, which pops every time you make a payment. So essentially it's building trust, etc. So a lot of vendor management procurement happens in the hardware part of it, which could be both domestic but international. And then finally, the data aspect of it. So data is something which happens in both ways in terms of DPI. It also stays with country if you have data localization norms, if you have data housed within the premise of the particular ministries, etc. But also a lot of countries also go for cloud-based data because it's cheaper, it's easily retractable. You can also switch clouds, etc. So I think how can, and to sort of summarize this and say, how can DPI enable sovereignty is of course use open technologies. I think that's the most important thing. But through regulation, uh, use data localization norms, get better deals with vendor, make sure that for poorer countries particularly, that a vendor does not come and harass you. So if you are going for a vendor, make sure that there's a high degree of vendor interoperability in your case, that if you want to move your data from Google Cloud to AWS or to Oracle, you can do it. Choices. I think at the very stage of conceptualization, design choices matter a lot. Go open by design, use open source, open standards, pick domestic vendor as much as you can. Don't rely for the big vendors because they have a lot to service and you will be on the last tier list to be serviced. And I think the final and the most important thing is the funding. Try to get neutral donors who do not try to push you a certain kind of technologies. Try to find partners who are invested in the longevity of the system and not the constituency back home that wants to sell you a certain kind of software, which then the servicing of it will be super expensive. So I think with that, I will conclude my statements. There is a big link, and we've seen in countries like India, South Africa, Brazil, etc., where DPI is enabling high degree of sovereignty, but there are multiple facets to that sovereignty that still needs to be figured out, that still needs to be tweaked, that still needs to be better managed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ritu. Now, Mrs. Renata Miele is a journalist and the coordinator of the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee. She is also a special advisor to the Ministry of the Science, Technology and Innovation. Renata, could you comment on how the Brazilian plan for artificial intelligence relates to the challenges around digital sovereignty?
Thanks, Rodolfo. Thanks for IGF for this workshop. I think Dr. Ming, Catherine, Korstian, and Ritu bring a very broad perspective about sovereignty, infrastructure. Dr. Ming brings some concepts, Catherine brings the aspects of connectivity, and Korstian bring another aspect. Ritu told us about DPI. I will answer your question, but as I'm the last one to speak, I'm going to bring some summarize aspects about how Brazil and Brazilian government are seeing this broader challenging regarding sovereignty in infrastructure. Well, I started pointing something that's very obviously, but nowadays we need to tell the obviously, that we live in a world in transition where every day all human activities, social, economic, and cultural relations are mediated by information and communication technologies, by a broad digital ecosystem. The mastery of these new technologies reshapes the international geopolitical board and redefines groups of countries that are producers and consumers of the digital technologies. And this is our main concern these days. We bring this debate during our G20 presidency under the AI priority we led on the Digital Economy Working Group this year. Besides AI, we had three other priorities issues: meaningful connectivity, DPI, and information integrity, all starting from this perspective about how we can move and address the challenge of these asymmetries we have in terms of technology and emergence, new technologies. Well, these issues relate to these asymmetries between and within countries exist in many areas and have been present for a long time. This scenario has deepened significantly with the emergence of large digital platforms which, in a way, determine the current economic model of society and set new forms of capital accumulation. A few large companies, the big techs, operate in various areas of the economy, but have platforms at the core of their operation that mediate commercial transactions, the flow of information, the provision of services, and in this very moment, all the infrastructure and knowledge about the development and the employment of AI in world. Regarding AI and other emerging technologies, what we have now, we are facing a scenario that, at least till this moment, we are facing a deepening divide and inequalities, particularly in the global south. In this sense, the debate about the digital sovereignty is increasing. This term refers, as Dr. Ming said, among other things, to a national's strategy autonomy or its capacity to develop digital tools and artificial intelligence using its own infrastructure, datasets, workforce, and businesses. Furthermore, it involves the ability to independently regulate and deciding on its own digital and AI path in a quest to ensure inclusive growth and sustainable development. The digital sovereignty refers to the ability of states to control their own infrastructure, emphasizing the position of each country in controlling ICTs, that is, a greater or lesser degree of autonomy to make choices and decisions in the field of technology. And of course, in the field of cooperation with other countries, this is very important also. So, for us in Brazil, we have some key perspectives. The role of the states, so emphasizing the importance of government action through public policies that support the development of technological infrastructure, science, and technology initiatives and industrial policies to foster innovation and reduce dependency. This includes encouraging and promoting the use of national technologies and regulating the use of foreign technological tools. I'm going to say next about precisely about AI plan, but we have another public policies regarding industrial economic development and other initiatives that compose a very large umbrella of public policies regarding investments and in technology. The second point, sovereign digital infrastructures, development and maintaining independent digital infrastructures that ensure national control and security, meaningful connectivity. We also face profound challenges in the field of meaningful connectivity and access. This is how to reduce the prices of equipment, for example, cell phones and computers for the population. We cannot see only the access aspect. We need to see more broader aspect when we talking about meaningful connectivity. After all, if we are talking about leaving no one behind, we need to develop the capabilities locally to offer better services to society. For this, there must be meaningful, connective, and we need to strategically think about how to build a permanent digital training process for the entire population, from young people to the elderly, for people living in both urban and rural areas. In addition to connectivity, we need to think about the availability of equipment, especially cell phones, which is the most used device to access services that have the quality and minimal capacity to run applications and tools that use AI. Governance and regulation, and now in Brazil we are discussing a bill regarding regulation on AI. And for us, it's crucial to create frameworks for data governance and platform regulations also that ensure accountability, transparency, and ethical use of technology. In this scenario, where the digital systems available in the country, platforms and AI tools, are mostly international, it's necessary to discuss regulatory mechanisms that establish rules for the operation of these companies in the country, with transparency obligations about their systems, granular information about aspects that have economic, social, and political impacts, conduct adjustments mechanisms, among many other regulatory aspects related to social and human rights, security and privacy, and also develop sovereignty in security and privacy technologies. So for AI to have a positive impact in catalyzing innovation aimed to reduce inequalities and other social issues, its development must be guided by this purpose from the outset. This includes its conception, production, programming, the use of training dataset structures to enable AI to achieve its goals with accuracy, linguistic, cultural, and geographical diversity. Otherwise, AI could become yet another driver of inequality. This is why data sovereignty is central to the development, implementation, and use of AI by countries that aspire to any degree of self-determination. Those was the main focus that Brazil brought to the G20 Digital Economy Working Group this year. We produce as Brazilian presidency contribution a toolkit for AI readiness assessment in partnership with UNESCO, that was our knowledge partner, with insights to leverage the potential of enabling a holistic and inclusive approach to the ethical and responsible development, deployment, and use of AI technologies, and also a map in AI adoption for enhanced public service, with insights into systematic monitoring and relevant opportunities and challenges supporting ethical AI applications within and by governments. Consider that DPI is, as Ritu said, a very strong and potent tool to inclusive and sovereignty digital for countries. In terms of public policies, the perspective I bring to this debate are reflecting our Brazilian AI plan, as Rodolfo said, led by Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation this year. A plan that forecasts an investment of 23 billion reais, around $4 billion in the next 4 years. For Brazil is a very huge amount of money. In terms of infrastructure and sovereignty, I highlight some investments from the Brazilian Artificial Intelligence Plan, such as National Infrastructure Program for AI, around $105 million, Sustainability and Renewable Energies Program from AI, around $83 million, Data and Software Ecosystem and Structuring Program for AI, $165 million, Research and Development Program in AI, $873 million, $144 million, and the perspective to achieve an AI supercomputer that put Brazil on the top of 5 supercomputers in the world. This is just some highlights on our AI plan that has 5 axes regarding governance, private sector investments, reskilling and capacities from workforce, and also infrastructure investments. That's it for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for the very relevant points. Now We are going to open the floor to questions of the audience inside and online. First, we can start inside.
Hello, good afternoon. So, Luca Belli, professor at WV Law School. Very happy to hear that the research I've been conducting with Professor Min Zhang has been presented here, and sorry if I was late, I was in another session. I was very happy also to see that a lot of the points that we raise in the research are now well integrated, but maybe some of them are not so well integrated. Let me give you a very good example. Because we have been doing a lot of research on AI sovereignty all over the past couple of years. And of course, connectivity is one of the points that we stress is essential to achieve AI sovereignty. And let me give you a very concrete example that also speaks to the debate on DPI that was brought here. Most global south countries, including Brazil, do not have meaningful connectivity. We have most of the population connected to zero rating plans, so to basically a very small selection of apps, including mainly the Meta family of apps. So to give you concrete details that friends from CETIC here can confirm, thanks to a very good study they have done on meaningful connectivity this year, 78% of the population in Brazil does not have meaningful connectivity. It means that only 22% are meaningfully connected. What does it mean concretely? That I think the Brazilian government is putting a lot of money. Actually, we are analyzing this primarily in software and data with the AI plan. But even if we have the best possible language models trained with Brazilian data, if all Brazilians only access Meta AI through WhatsApp that is zero rated, whereas no one else will be able to access the new fantastic domestic models created thanks to the plan, that is not the very best way of directing the public investment. And this is due to the fact that the access is an incredibly relevant variable in this context. As you were saying, as we have been demonstrating with research, the fact that 78% of the population simply access Meta AI and will never access Brazilian technology because they will keep on not having money to pay for full internet connectivity and only being directed to Meta, Facebook, WhatsApp. That is an enormous impediment from national innovation. And so it frustrates a lot the logic, very good logic of putting public money to improving national research and development, but then at the end of the day, the consumers will not use it and will keep on not only using another non-Brazilian technology, but also train it. So for free, of course. So I think the entire logic here is a little bit frustrated. And let me give you a very good example of an institution in Brazil that has understood this logic very well. The Brazilian Central Bank, when they introduced PIX, our UPI, our Brazilian digital public infrastructure for payment, WhatsApp wanted to launch WhatsApp payments, but they blocked it. And they suspended it, and the rationale was precisely because if it had been launched before PIX, everyone in Brazil would have used only WhatsApp payment, and no one today, we would not be here praising PIX as an example of success stories if the Brazilian Central Bank hadn't blocked WhatsApp payment and hadn't not suspended it until the entry in force of PIX. Because otherwise everyone in Brazil here would be using only WhatsApp payment, and PIX nobody would even know what it is. So I think that these are points that if not considered, I know that very well that the Brazilian AI plan does not consider connectivity, but I think it's a mistake. And I think that this, as you were saying, is an essential point and should be brought into the picture. Otherwise, we risk putting a lot of public money for nothing. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question, Luca. Now let's go to the online question. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is José Renato. I am a researcher at the University of Bonn Sustainable AI Lab and also co-founder of Lapin, a non-profit organization in Brazil. Well, thank you so much. Amazing insights. I was actually wanting to ask the presenter speaker from Georgia. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. I really apologize for that.
No worries, it's Eka. You can call me Eka.
Okay, nice to meet you. I was actually wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the data center related initiatives in Georgia, and also if you could also share how are you thinking on embedding this within like energy infrastructure, water infrastructure, as this has been a very wide and hot topic in the last few months, I would say. So if you could share some thoughts about that, and also Brazilian government's thinking about this kind of thing. So I think it would be interesting to hear. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much for amazing question. Thank you. Actually, you pointed out in the question the topics that I've actually missed and wanted to share about. So the data center topic, what we have now under discussion is like, first of all, as a regulator and as a state representative, we are working a lot about enabling access to the existing internet infrastructure, opening market, building the IXP neutral exchange point. This is the first step we are seeing to be, it's an ongoing process. It's somehow already almost done. And this is the first step to enable then the data center. Another topic is resilience of infrastructure and finding out that we're quite small country, but still find the geography where the data center is best to be located from also the energy point of view. The good side of the story is that we have, Georgia is the green energy producing country, so we can ensure that the energy produced locally will be the green energy, which is a very important component of building the right data center and bringing the investors to be interested in this kind of the projects. And also related to this, one thing is producing green energy. Another point is having the geographic location where the energy efficiency will be the best with its actually with support of Amazon did some kind of research that in Georgia these energy efficient locations are present, and this is this is kind of projected level, but there is a lot of stuff still ongoing to be done. Security aspect, physical security aspects are very important that still needs to be resolved. And another part is also energy prices. We're quite competitive, electricity prices. So this is those are the different, different components of the projects we need to solve and put together. Yes, and most importantly, to understand financing model which will work best for this. To make not only the local, like Georgia-specific project, but regional projects. So investment options are there on table, whether the state should be part of it, or it should be totally public, or it should be public-private partnership, etc. Those are kind of points to be resolved still. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's do a round of the two more questions, and the speakers will answer.
Yes, I'll just make the online questions, and I think I have one more from the audience here, and then we make a round of the speakers answering, okay? From on the Zoom questions, we have Azim asking, he likes to learn about Peace Cable that Meta is investing, so maybe again to Eka about platforms investing in and cable. Another question from Vahan. He asks, digital public infrastructure, if translated to other languages, can be translated as a state infrastructure, and this would be controlled or owned by them. Is there a line and widely accepted understanding of what DPI is? And finally, a question to Dr. Min. Examining digital sovereignty as a supranational issue, how does regime type influence collaboration? Are democratic regimes more likely to cooperate than authoritarian ones, or this is an outdated assessment? I think maybe we can do another one more here. Okay, I think this is the. It was your question.
I have an online question. Yes. Just a correction.
I think it's the last one because of time.
No, it was the same. So I had two questions there. So we have discussed. It was my question that you have said. Yeah. One. Do you hear me? That's okay. So I had here two questions. So we have discussed several activities for infrastructure development, but they all or almost all were for regional connectivity. So the question is that how can the digital sovereignty on digital infrastructure that has a regional impact be used as a weapon against other countries? And if yes, how it can be eliminated? And a small comment that maybe many regional projects require several states to get engaged. So how can we ensure proper stability and productive management on the infrastructure, taking into account the challenges that we have discussed today about digital sovereignty and digital public infrastructures? And also that question.
Thank you for the question. And now, when answering the question, please give him your closing lines and the final comments. And can we start by the same order with Dr. Min?
Sure. Thank you for the great question, Nara. And I think it's a tricky question. I will make 2 points in relation to your question. First of all, traditional notions or definitions of sovereignty are usually predicated on nation states having a form of autonomy or self-determination, but do not take into account in reality the very notion of power, right? Small nations and small states know this very well, especially in the digital age. Big tech have power and financial power that can easily eclipse those of small nation states. In fact, if one examines the telegeography map that our previous speaker referred to early on about global undersea cables, companies like Amazon, Google, Facebook, all have their own dedicated infrastructure at that level, right? So small countries, not only in the global south, but also, for example, EU, they recognize that in order to be sovereign, they must also cooperate and build alliances, okay? So this is an important point to recognize. Also in previous speaker Ritu's account of public digital infrastructure, he makes the case that nation states' digital development, especially those in the global south, have to draw upon open source and free software, which are very, very important notions to common digital sovereignty. So I think we need to disrupt how we think about sovereignty to begin with. And second, the question is about regime types. It's a very, very important notion for sure. But we also need to recognize, the regime types are labels that we attach to nations. But nations also change and evolve. The political system, as we have seen in the United States, in my own country, has evolved a lot. We just elected Donald Trump for a second term, right? So how do we label countries and what type of regime they are is becoming more and more challenging. And United States, is a country with great power, and with great power comes great responsibility, right? And what NSA, for example, implemented, for a long time, and what the big tech are doing, perhaps challenge this very notion of what it means to be democratic. And I think we're at an age where the older sort of conceptualization and infrastructure and legal regime to think about democratic is somewhat breaking down. And that's why we're seeing this resurgence of claim to digital sovereignty, and different actors, national or international, are hoping to gain more independence, autonomy, and self-determination. So yes, I'm happy to carry on the conversation through some other means, but I will restrict my comments to the BOF for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Min. Catherine?
Yes, very challenging questions. Let me put it this way, and exactly the echoing the what are the underlying challenges with sovereignty and on the, starting from infrastructure level up to the service and data protection level. What I wanted to outline that yes, on the one hand side, the sovereignty can be used as some kind of weapon, some kind of strength from the one country having the totally sovereign kind of infrastructure, not giving the access and kind of isolating from one hand side, conceptually isolating the country. On the other hand side, it requires a lot of effort when we speak about the regional perspective, putting the regional concept of sovereignty. So countries with very different political views should sit together and agree on the major terms. But I think that this debate of digital sovereignty, why it is an open debate and why it is an evolving debate, that countries still are trying to understand what are this basic and minimal concept of, on the one hand side, independence of infrastructure and data, and at the same time, the shared framework of data independence or protection of data. Without this kind of the touch points among countries, between countries with very different political or views or geopolitical locations, it's impossible to let this very interconnected world work. We will need more and more interconnected data centers, otherwise it will not work at all. But at the same time, countries and regions are required to protect themselves by owning some kind of the infrastructure. So I think that this is the thin line where we need to all agree, and we need to introduce some kind of frameworks. For Georgia, what I can answer is that the EU framework we decided to go with, existing EU framework of this sovereignty concept on data level GDPR, that is provided by EU framework, legal framework for data protection, is the one that is acceptable for us, and we think that this is the best model we can introduce, and it should work for our region as well for the current situation. This is my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Christian, please.
I'll make my closing remarks very short. Maybe firstly, just to say thank you to everyone, to the organizers for the participation, to my fellow panelists for the interesting discussion. Without stepping ahead, Ritul, of the questions passed to yourself, maybe just a couple of thought provokers on the regional considerations for sovereignty. Maybe just to propose the question around how one manages the aspirations of the AU to develop a continental identity system, and how that would be governed and managed, and the extent to which that is a risk of, or how to prevent exclusion across different markets. And then curious to hear from my fellow participant following me, their view on multiple definitions of DPI. And what that big and small p looks like as we think about our colleague, Mr. Eves. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Tristan. I think to answer the first question, which I'm going to take away, that how do we ensure stability and management of DPI? I'm not going to do a regional, I don't have an answer to that, but I can say, like, just in terms of a geographical context, what we need to do is ensure that you have the highest grade data centers, tier 4 grade data centers, you have security assessment, you have regular audits, and you could do similar things in cross-border context if you have an ID payment or data sharing, which is in a regional context. We don't have it in India's case, but as we build, I think these are the 3 tech metrics that will follow, but then there will also be some non-tech, which is the governance side of it, which will also follow. Now, answering the perplexing puzzle of the DPI, which is what is the P about? Should DPIs be controlled or owned by state? I think to start off with, there's no clear definition of DPI. I think it's at a very evolving stage. The G20 definition is as confusing as clarifying as it is, and I take some blame for it, but but if you think about it, it has to be understood from a different grade perspective. Something like an identity is a very sovereign function. To say you are you is can be trusted by a sovereign state more than any other entity. So in India's case, ID sits out of the Ministry of Electronics and IT. It's a statutory organization backed by a constitutional law, and the entity is posted with civil servants, etc. So it's a very, very state-driven function. On the contrary, payment system is rather fluid. It is a non-profit structure. It's a Section 8 company, which is a non-profit in India's case. It is a conglomeration of different banks and the central bank coming together and just building the protocol. The rest of it is actually controlled by different banks who come and participate on top of it. But the role of the state in that case is the regulator. The state is only the regulator in India's payments scenario. And similarly, the document, the data sharing wallet as well, the state, again, a Section 8 company has created it, which the state only regulates in terms of how you can share your credentials, etc. So I think it'll differ on a country to country basis. I remember some time back, I was in Ghana and I was talking to the bureaucrat there, and he said, in our country, everything is a very private sector driven phenomenon. So how do we do it? So I think it will be a very country to country phenomenon wherein but in my limited experience, most ID systems, and I think Kristen will agree to it, we met last week in Bangalore, most ID systems are part of either the home ministry or the IT ministries, etc. So you will see a lot of identity function, which is so central to any targeted beneficiary delivery. It is essentially establishing your relationship with the state is done by the state. But other DPI functions can be performed by different partners. In fact, SyncPass, PayNow, Prompt Pay, etc. These are some payment systems and other systems which are created by the private sector in conglomeration with the state. But the state's role is, at least in this case, to be a regulator, to be an observer, that nobody creates disproportionate amount of monopolies, that nobody is not playing by the rules. So to set the broad rules of the game, and then let the players come and build on the basis of what purpose does it serve. So if it's something which requires high degree of trust, authenticity, etc., state is the best entity to do it. If it's something which can be created by different market players coming together, state can be an observer or regulator. So that's my view. Finally, on DPI and sovereignty, I think it's a very important link to be made there. My only concern is that as most countries go in the quest to build their DPIs, we should not lose sight of cross-border interoperability or interoperability of those different DPIs. So as we all go towards making our own payment systems, as we go towards making our ID systems, etc., we also need to be cognizant enough that we are also thinking of regional blocks. We're also thinking of cross-border interoperability, etc. So to not lose that. Otherwise, I think in a broader scheme of things, DPI is a big-time enabler of sovereignty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ritu. Renata, your final answer.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for this interesting panel. I will start saying that we need to see sovereignty, digital sovereignty, as complementary as with cooperation. It's not just different things. If since each country faces different realities in these areas, in digital areas, cooperation will be fundamental. Without cooperation, we are not going to achieve sovereignty. Establishing mechanisms for regional cooperation that create complementarity strategies based on each country's capabilities may be a more effective and faster path toward reducing inequalities and achieving greater autonomy for nations. I think we have to keep this in mind. Regarding the question that Luca made about connectivity in Brazil. He knows I'm a profoundly and deeply critical of zero rating. But it's important to say that in Brazil we have a huge public policy in terms of strategic investments of government that calls PAC. How can I say PAC? Growth Acceleration Program. And the connectivity policies are in the PAC, and with 28 billion reals, something around $5 billion to invest in building connectivity in technologies 5G, 4G, building backhauls, backbones, school connectivity, health system connectivity. So there is a public policy that are being made inside the communication Ministry of Communications. And we, as I see, and as the government see, as my minister, Science, Technology, Innovation see, we cannot wait to solve the problems regarding connectivity. And I'm completely agree with you. Brazil doesn't have meaningful connectivity for all population, but we need to start to build expertise and investments in infrastructure and in all the economic chain of the AI, because we need to start from some point. So these are two policies that need to be put in movement with each other. Communications are dealing with connectivity, doing the investments, and we, as Minister of Science and Innovation and other governments, in other ministers, are focused on how to build capabilities in terms of reskilling, in terms of infrastructure, and building applications, AI applications. So that's my point. We need to do the both thing together. So if you want to achieve some autonomy, sovereignty in Brazil regarding technology, digital technology, and AI. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and that's it.
Thank you to our speakers for their great contributions, and to everyone in the audience. This has been a very good workshop. We appreciate the IGF organization for facilitating this valuable discussion. Thank you all. Que deu para passar. E acredito que eu não fiquei tão nervoso, né?
Na hora a gente vai, né?
O problema é querer... O problema é o seu olho, ele tá lá na frente querendo ver, deixa você fazer pausa da PEU, né? Não, eu tô lendo lá na frente, não, tô falando uma coisa. Bom, rapaz, eu tô fazendo também, né? Ah, é? Pô, desculpa, eu nem vi você, velho. Tá aqui atrás, ó. Não, sim, beleza. Essa mesa é zoada, cara. Você vê? Nem vê quem tá. Nem vi o Luca entrando, hein?
Sem 13 tava concentrado, cara. Eu já tinha falado com a Júlia.
Ah, é? Já tinha, né?
Como é que é? Não, falei aqui no negócio da minha pergunta. Relaxa. Não, mas você acha legal. Eu também tô acabado, cara. Só tá pior que o menino.
Meia-noite e pouco. No hotel. É, no hotel. Oh, pior é que tem um negócio pra beber pra relaxar, né? Isso me deixa mais chato.
Puta que pariu, cara.
A Tati nem pediu pra devolver.
Sim, não, eu já defendi, mas...
Você não tem mais nada hoje, né?
Hoje acho que não.
Acho que era muito bom.
Não,
foi lá amanhã.
Hã?
a gente queria falar comigo, mas eu queria que fosse amanhã. Cansada.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Não, vocês vão ficar prontos. Só esse pra Só pra tomar cadeira.
Rapporteur. Rapporteur, né? Hein?
Fica tranquilo. Agora tem que entregar o...
Passar no banheiro de novo, pegar fila aí.
Ah, eu também, mas acho que eu tô quase desistindo do hotel.
ചൂടാണുള്ളത് ലാപ്പ് പോവാന്നാല് ആപ്പിൾ നീലുള്ളതല്ല ആപ്പിൾ ബോക്സിലുള്ളതാണ് ഞാൻ നീലെടുത്തിരിക്കുന്നത് ചെറുക്കന് അവിടെ കൊണ്ടുവച്ച് വെൽവെറ്റ് കേക്ക് എടുത്ത് കഴിക്കും ചിലതിൽ നിന്ന് വെൽവെറ്റ് കേക്ക് കഴിക്കും എനിക്ക് വെൽവെറ്റ് കേക്ക് അല്ല എനിക്ക് വെജിൻ്റെതായി റെഡ് വെൽവെറ്റ് ഉണ്ട് അടിപൊളി കേക്ക് അല്ല എനിക്ക് ആ മീറ്റല്ല കിട്ടിയത് ഫിഷ് മീറ്റ് ഇല്ലേ കേടായതല്ല അത് അങ്ങനെ പിന്നെ മറ്റേ പരിപ്പിൻ്റെ അറിയില്ല മറ്റേ അതിന് പകരം വെജിലാണെങ്കിൽ അതിന് പകരം ഇതുണ്ടോ ഇതിലൊക്കെ നാളെ നമുക്ക് ലഞ്ച് പറ്റുന്നുണ്ട് ബേക്ക് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നമുക്ക് ലഞ്ചിന് മെനു വന്നോ ഞാൻ കണ്ട് ലഞ്ചിന് മെനു എനിക്ക് കോംസ് കൊടുത്തോളെ കോംസ് കൊടുക്കട്ടെ ഫുഡിന്റെ വേസ്റ്റാ പുറത്തുകൊണ്ട് ഇടല്ലേ അതിപ്പോ കഴിക്കാൻ പോയിട്ടാ നിങ്ങൾ കഴിച്ചാ മീൻ കഴിച്ചോ മീൻ കഴിച്ചോ ഞാൻ കഴിച്ചില്ല നെയ്മോ ഒരു ചായ ടേസ്റ്റ് അല്ലേ കേട് വന്നിട്ടൊരു സംശയം ആ സ്ഥിരം മെനു തന്നെ പച്ചയാണ് പറഞ്ഞത് ഡ്രസ് കൊടുക്കണം പിന്നെ പിന്നെ ഊരി ഇതിൽ മറ്റു ഷിജുവിനോടൊക്കെ ആളുടെ ഇടയിലൊക്കെ എന്തെങ്കിലും കണക്ട് ചെയ്യാൻ അതില്ലെങ്കിൽ എനിക്ക് കുറച്ചാലും അങ്ങനെ നടക്കട്ടെ ശബ്ദമൊക്കെ അത് മറ്റും ഞാനവിടെ ഇടയ്ക്ക് യൂസ് ചെയ്യല് പവർ ബാങ്കിന്റെ കേബിൾ അത് അന്നുണ്ടായിരുന്നല്ലോ ബ്ലാക്ക് ആണോ ബ്ലാക്ക് ആന്ന് റെഡാന്ന് ഓർമ്മയില്ല സിസ്റ്റം കറച്ച് വയ്ക്കുക ഞാൻ പോയി കറച്ച് വെച്ചിട്ടല്ലോ വേറൊന്നുമില്ല നീ ഈ സാധനം കൊടുക്കണോ അതാണ് ഞാനിപ്പോ